Well, during the last 3 weeks of the Karnataka campaign, the daily hike in fuel prices was 0. But in the last 8 days, there have not only been daily but steep rises. In the capital, it's been raised by as much as almost 2 rupees. It's the highest ever in Delhi and Mumbai and 7 paise away from being the highest in Chennai. Notably in Kolkata, where petrol is the cheapest, it's almost 4.5 rupees from the highest ever, mainly because the state tax is the lowest of all the metros. From March last year, India has paid $22 billion more for oil because of a $17 rise per barrel. But in the last couple of months, it's gone up to almost $78 for the Indian crude oil basket. Because of rising international crude prices, the rupee continues to be under pressure, closing at 68.12 against the dollar. Analysts say this is because of the rising crude oil prices continue to put pressure on the rupee, and also a strong American dollar, especially after the US Treasury Secretary and the trade war with China was on hold, thereby easing tensions somewhat. Some experts believe that the possibility of the rupee heading towards the $70 mark against the US dollar is increasing.
पहले 500 में हम लोग धंधा करते थे, दिन भर में आज 800 रुपए 900 रुपए का डीजल लग रहा है हमको।
आप नाराज हैं सरकार से? इस पर
सरकार से बहुत नाराज हूँ।
रेट बढ़ा नहीं सकते, कंपटीशन इतने चल रहे हैं, ओला ओवर चल चुकी है जिससे हमें रेट नहीं बढ़ पा रहे, और डीजल बढ़ने के बाद में लोगों को बोलते हैं रेट बढ़ा दो, वो कहते हैं नहीं हम तुम्हारी गाड़ी नहीं ले सकते।
In the summers, AC is also required, so petrol is consuming more. Immediately the governments must take action on the excise duty of the petrol. At least there will be some relief for 4-5 rupees to the common man.
सरकार सुने फायदा नहीं, बोलना सब बेकार हो गया, क्या करेगा आदमी लोग? तो पेट्रोल भराना पर जरूरी है।
Each of India's top 6 states are governed by a different party, only one by the BJP. But yet they are all united on one thing: no move to cancel the state taxes on their duties, neither will the centre, which forms a major chunk of the resources.
आम आगु भी तो करूँ जो आम गत अक्टोबर मसरे 2 टंका एक्साइज ड्यूटी कमेलु से अनुरोध करूँ आम जे आपण भी एठी कमांदु से परिहास करथिले कमेलेनी एबे देखिए पुणी आउथर अनुरोध करबा।
So why are the prices so high? Yes, international oil prices are rising, but it's not just because of that. Because, going by Delhi and Mumbai's example, the price of the Indian crude oil basket is about the same as November 2014, $77, but petrol is 13 rupees higher and diesel 15 and 12 rupees higher in Delhi and Mumbai respectively. The centre, after 2014, raised duties 9 times when oil prices were low, which explains why its revenue has risen sharply over the states. As of today, more than half the price a person in Delhi pays for a litre of petrol is tax. Almost 20 rupees goes to the centre and 16 rupees in Delhi, for example, to the state, and almost 4 rupees as commission to the dealer. The cost price of petrol is just 37 rupees and 19 paise. Rising oil prices have a ripple effect on the Indian economy. The first direct one is on the rupee, which today hit 68.15 this morning, the weakest in recent weeks. Interest rates could rise. An SBI report estimates that for every $10 rise in oil prices, inflation will rise by 0.3% and GDP will dip by as much as 0.16%. The worst impact could be on the fiscal deficit, i.e. the government spending more than its revenue. This may widen by almost 0.1% for every $10 hike.
They say that we need these resources to keep the deficit down, right? But the question is, you can always raise resources in multiple ways. You could tax other commodities which are not as basic as petroleum. Inflation would rise, and that would impact the production negatively. And when you have to import more, your exports are not doing all that well, then the chances are that the rupee could depreciate, further. And if that happens, then of course the price would rise even further, as you said. So of course there's a feedback effect.
Crude prices are far lower than under the UPA's last years. Controlling petrol and diesel prices is easier said than done, but with some forecasting oil at $100 a barrel, the BJP-led government will need to work out some response quickly, especially with more elections approaching.
Tomorrow, oil companies will explain their strategy, but the focus will be on the finance ministry and whether it has any elbow room to cut taxes on fuel, especially in an economy that is sending mixed signals about how well it's doing. With Snigdha Basu and camera person Ashok Mahale, this is Nimisha Jaiswal for NDTV.
So what really are the options available at this stage? Joining us, Gurcharan Das, Dr. Arvind Virmani, PN Vijay with us as well. Mihesh Sharma with me in the studio, Dr. Gaurav Vallabh of the Congress Party, and Dr. Jagdish Shettigar. I'd like to thank all of you very much for joining us. Gurcharan Das, to you first. A few years back, the government decided that, look, we've had enough of subsidizing our oil companies, that the subsidy to our oil companies was untenable. They were becoming incredibly unaffordable and unprofitable. And so we moved away from that. But when we are confronted with a situation like this, do you believe that subsidies need to be reintroduced, at least partly?
No. I think that the process of reform in India is a very slow, tortured process, and this has been a great victory. First, the UPA decontrolled the price partly, and then Modi came in and decontrolled the price of diesel. And so it would be a great loss if we went back. India has risen because although it has been incremental, India has not gone back on the reforms, and that's why it's become one of the fastest growing economies in the world. So that option should be off the table.
Okay.
Now, it's not an easy situation. It's not an easy situation because the other option is that half the cost of oil and
yes.
diesel is taxes.
We'll just get to that, sir. In fact, we'll get to that.
And the sensible.
Right. No, in fact, I wanted to ask Dr. Virmani about just that, sir. Taxes, and the fact of the matter is that 50% of the cost per litre of fuel, of petrol in cities like Delhi is actually taxes. When we talk about rationalizing taxes within each litre of petrol or diesel for that matter, how is the best way forward? And do you believe that that is something that needs to be immediately looked into?
See, there are three reasons why taxes on oil products, refined products, are high. One is that historically it's an inelastic commodity, and inelastic commodities have always, according to tax theory, for 100 years have had higher taxes on inelastic than elastic. The second reason is, of course, which you all know, that a large part of the oil from which these products are made is imported. The third reason is more important and more recent, and that is pollution. You know, one of the reasons why you have now maintained higher taxes is it's like a carbon tax or a pollution tax. So, for example, Europe has among the highest taxes in the world. Japan is kind of second, and I think we come somewhere around in that third one. So you have to decide, is pollution and carbonization of the country a good thing or a bad thing? So these are the three main reasons for high taxes on diesel and petrol. Now, people have talked about including this item in the GST, and that somehow magically these rates will go down. That's not true. If you reduce taxes on petroleum products, something else will have to be raised, and I don't think it's people realize that that may be equally bad or worse.
PN Vijay, the centre after 2014 raised duties on fuel 9 times when oil prices were actually relatively low, which is why the revenue of the centre has gone up dramatically, in fact much larger as a percentage than it has over states. Can there be some sort of rationalization which can be done towards the profits made by the centre in collecting taxes and fuel? Because no state government, irrespective of which party controls the state, wants that revenue to be hit at all.
Vishnu has strong views on this. First of all, I think for the BJP it's politically suicidal to keep increasing the prices, especially with state elections and the general elections coming last 12 months. So this is bad politics. I also believe this is bad economics, because even when I was very active within the BJP, I always told the seniors that we should not be following Nehruvian socialism of tax and spend. This country has been ruined for the past 50-60 years by the Congress because of its high tax and spend, which assumes that the government is a better spender of money than the people. Now what's happening in India today is because you have such high income taxes, such high indirect taxes, excise and GST, etc., that the people have no money left, surplus left, and private sector is not investing, private individuals, households are not consuming, government is the only person who's spending money. This can't go on, and government is very inefficient in spending money. Its flow through and execution is very poor. So I think Modi should be well advised to go back to BJP's original thinking of market-based economics, where you tax less, you spend less. The whole idea is to put more money in the hands of the consumer. They should go back to that, because this is going to be not only politically suicidal, but it's going to not lead us anywhere. So much of unemployment is there, and this argument that there is a pollution tax is, I don't agree at all. Except for New Delhi, it is impossible in any other city in India for any middle class person to commute by public transport. He has to have a scooter or motor car, though it is very expensive. Only in Delhi the metro network is very good. So how can we keep on increasing taxes saying it is good for pollution? Then how will people go to their offices?
Mm-hmm. Dr. Chettikar, the price of Indian crude oil is about the same as it was in 2014 November, which is $77 is what it was then. It's more or less the same now. But petrol is 13 rupees higher, diesel 15 rupees higher, depending on which city you're in. So to people in this country, if they look at what the cost of crude oil actually was earlier on, it seems terribly unfair that this is what the situation is. So what is the way forward according to you?
No, there is a double blow this time. Apart from rise in the crude oil prices, the rupee has been getting depreciated, which is, it's very difficult to communicate to the common people, that yes. Anyway. Now, as far as the solution, because these factors are beyond the government's control, whether it is the threat of apprehension over the war between the US and the North Korea, which has raised the demand apart from the OPEC strategy. Mm-hmm. But I feel that ideally we should bring petroleum product into GST net, because if you bring the GST net, in addition to the basic price of around 37 or the 38, even if we put highest GST rate of 28%, I think the price will be less than 50 rupees. I don't agree with the Mr. Virmani when he says that would affect the government revenue. In that, if that is the argument, so many essential products should also be kept out of the GST net. But this requires the consensus between the center as well as the states, because in order to get the GST bill passed, there was some compromise, and this liquor and the tobacco was kept out in order to protect the interest of the states. And similarly, the petroleum product. In the petroleum product, states also get the revenue, like in the case of, I think, the Karnataka 30%, yes. Probably the Maharashtra 45%. Yes. So there has to be consensus. In fact, last time, about a couple of months back, Dharmendra Pradhan said that we are thinking of moving towards bringing petroleum products into the GST net.
That's
and another option is that if there is no consensus, let us try to implement the recommendations of the Tax Reforms Committee headed by Mr. Kelkar, who suggested that the petroleum products duties should be on the specific basis, not on the ad valorem, that is to put it to the common man's understanding, right. Not on the percentage basis, because in the case of the percentage basis, along with the price of the crude oil prices, the tax collections will also go up.
Right. I just wanted to bring you in on this. During this entire Karnataka campaign, the daily hike in prices for fuel was 0. Isn't this very clearly linked towards the elections at that stage?
Well, I think that we've heard a lot about how
And now we are suffering.
deregulation took place, but this was, this seems to be evidence that, well, the deregulation is not complete, let us say. I mean, there was, according to some institutional analysts, it's about a 500 crore hit that the oil marketing companies have taken, which is that we have all taken, because the oil marketing companies are publicly owned. So you have to, the point about deregulation of fuel prices was to depoliticize it, all right? And we haven't been able to convince the people of India and that in fact these decisions are no longer political. And that is what should have been focused on by the government. And the reason we haven't been able to convince them is precisely because we have played around with taxes one way or the other. There should have been even if you want to have higher taxes on fuel for whatever reason, for revenue or for carbon tax, for pollution, etc., have a constant higher tax, not one that is subject to discretion. All right, because the moment you bring in government discretion, the moment you bring in political discretion, it means that the man on the street thinks, yes, the government is still in charge of the fuel price, and that is not what we want to have.
Dr. Vallabh, why is the Congress playing politics with this entire issue? Because it's opportunistic. The Congress party had moved towards the process of deregulating oil prices. It was implemented subsequently. Why now at this stage are you coming up with messages and tweets that, look, common people are suffering, the prices have gone down, it is economic mismanagement? Had the situation been reversed, you would have had to have dealt with the same thing. The value of the dollar not necessarily in your hands.
See, I would like to draw your attention on three things. First, even in Gujarat elections also, there was no deregulation, there was no price volatility. So what is government agenda is that political agenda is above the public agenda. And I will give you three.
What is the political
agenda is that whenever there is an election,
right,
reduce the volatility or make the volatility zero.
Okay.
We are having
the elections are now
we
over.
are having 3-point solution.
And in Karnataka you are coming.
We are having 3-point solution. In Karnataka also we had reduced the state VAT, which is maximum across
so what are your solutions?
We had 3-point solution. First thing, see, more than petrol price, we are concerned over the diesel price, and diesel price is all-time high. So immediately government should cut down the diesel price excise duty by at least 6 rupee per litre and petrol price by 4 rupee per litre.
But that suits your
I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. Second,
because diesel feeds the agrarian sector, right? So
there's the reason. There's the reason I'm saying that
it is
not vote bank. Why you think everything is vote bank? The common man is suffering.
1 year to elections.
Second,
Congress party is speaking. Any party for that matter. If it's not vote bank, then what is it?
I'm coming to that, Vishnu.
Okay.
Second point, that from the beginning we are saying, and I am saying on behalf of Congress party, that include this in GST. So in medium term, let us sit together, make a common agenda, how it is going to be included, how states are going to be compensated, will states are going to get 100% compensation or not. So start the process in medium term. And from one more perspective is there, like in Andaman, you know what is the price of petrol? 64 rupees per litre. And Bombay 85 rupees per litre. One country, one nation, one tax. Where is that? 21 rupee difference in one country. So this is the second in medium term. And in long term, see, when internationally we have to take this agenda of responsible pricing, because OPEC, the group, had all set to take the petrol prices to $100 per barrel. So when Prime Minister goes to China, Russia with no agenda meeting, our request to him is that include one agenda, discuss with them that how to take this responsibility pricing, at least in G20 forum or in bigger forum, where we can affect the OPEC prices internationally.
Gurcharan Das, having one sort of parity in terms of prices across the country, the fact that there are such sharp differences, how would you react to that? Isn't it common sense that we need to ensure that that happens?
Well, I think it's common sense. I think what Mr. Shettigar said was absolutely correct, that we should follow the Vijay Kelkar report. One, include GST into include petroleum products into the GST. He was very clear about that. That will bring prices down, and then we can negotiate with a portion for the center and the states. But you've got to be part of GST. And then I think we should also respect the fact that, you know, we are in a market economy. That government, when the price of dal goes up, the government doesn't suddenly decide to decide the price of dal. So similarly, there's a business cycle. What's happening now is that the prices have been rising from 2016.
Yes.
It had declined from 14. Now we are again in a stage where American shale is coming on and within a couple of years the cycle will reverse, because you will have less demand and higher supply, and so the government has to educate the people. That's our biggest failure of all governments. We reform by stealth. We don't inform people that that the reforms are good for everybody.
P.N. Vijay had a point.
Reforms are not just good for business.
Mr. Vijay, you had a point. Go ahead.
And that's why.
Yeah, I think it is important for us to build a consensus that government should tax these products less. That's an absolute consensus that has to be built up by intellectuals, because I feel that more taxes the government collects, the more problems this country has. And having 50 to 55% of the price of fuel as tax just means that the government will start some more grandiose schemes like bullet trains and that, whereas the consumption, the power to consume in the middle class is going off. This is a very serious intellectual issue. This is not fiddling with taxes. All the state, Congress party and BJP should sit down and say, we will not tax these products more than 25 rupees per litre, period. Then let them tighten the belt, let them not have all these fancy advertisements coming in the paper, let them do so, let them not have such big entourages of cars. Let us determine to cut down government expenditure. What's the problem with that?
Okay, Dr. Virbani, you know, I mean, just from a pessimist standpoint, with 1 year to go for the elections, isn't it almost inevitable that there would be some sort of subsidy, irrespective of whether it makes no economic sense in the long run for us?
See, I think the two things need to be done. One, I agree that eventually it has to be part of GST, but that will require, for example, imposing a tax on the imported oil. The oil is actually taxed at a very low rate, and it distorts the margins for the refiners. So actually the refinery industry is not competitive. They are highly protected. They get very high effective protection. So we need to reform the refinery sector. It's not been reformed properly. There's not enough competition. One. Two, the duties are already specific. I think perhaps some of them have not been following, but the duties were made specific, I think, in 2012 or 2013. So there's been there's no natural increase of taxes as oil prices go up. It's really what one can object to, which I may not, but others could legitimately, is that when the oil prices went down, when they went up, excise duties were lowered. When they went up, down again, they were raised. So when they are going up, maybe they should again be lowered. So that's a legitimate point. I am not sure whether the excise is now higher or lower than it was, let's say, when we had $80 last time. So that's the second point. And third, if you include it in GST, even with 28%, you will have to have a very high surcharge, because there's no way you can make up 100% of the duty. There is no way the center can not only reduce its own tax, but also make up the state. So that is an illusion. I'm sorry. Either we cut down on expenditures and reduce taxes overall, but to think that somehow you can bring oil taxes down to 28 without doing anything else is, I'm sorry.
But let's look at it from the other side. Mihir, just a last quick comment, since we're running out of time. Can we expect this to continue in terms of prices going up in the near future?
Well, I think that, of course, the global crude oil price is something that is determined by in many cases geopolitical considerations and by global demand. It looks like we are, at least in the medium term, on climbing on a climbing sort of path for global oil prices, and it is deeply concerning actually, because you are, if prices continue to rise, and if, God forbid, there is an actual political crisis in West Asia, you will be in a situation where the economy, given our inability to build up exports over the past 4 or 5 years, will be once again looking pretty fragile. Maybe not as fragile as it was in 2013, but pretty fragile. And that's going to be bad news for pretty much everybody.
All right, well, let's see where the road lies ahead as far as these prices are concerned. One way or the other, millions are being impacted. I'd like to thank all of you very much for joining us.